better never ends. In health, in performance, no matter your starting point, you can always strive for better. My name's Charlie Goodchild, I'm your host, and this is the Better Never Ends podcast. We've made it our mission to share with you the expertise and wisdom of role models and leading experts in their field, teaching us about how we can be better, telling stories about their journey to better, and inspiring you to discover yours.
So in this episode, we've got John Cairns, who's come in to talk to us about the modern day chiropractor. So one of the things that even I was guilty of before is considering that all chiropractors were interested in money. They were very business oriented and they just cracked people, manipulated people and sent them on their way for plenty of money and told them to come back in 3 days' time. So John was the chiropractor who changed my opinion on that. He came in today to talk a bit about what being a modern day chiropractor is, which in some ways starts to blur the lines a little bit with other professions in a good way. So we talk about the history of chiropractic and probably where some of that bad press came from, which was really interesting. I didn't know this before, so it was really great to hear that. And also some of the questions I'm sure you're all wanting to know, which is, what is a click? What happens when you get clicked? Is there anything bad that happens? And if it makes you feel better, what's going on there? Well, how's that helping? So we answer all those questions, and weirdly, we both have a slightly different story about that, about what's going on. So probably the ultimate answer is that we don't really know yet, but there's some theories out there that might help. And I think what's most important here is that if you're a patient, is to really be critical of your clinician. You really want to make sure you find the right one. So we give you some tips about how to find the right clinician for you. And also, if you're a clinician yourself and you want to broaden your horizons a bit, we talk about how you might do that and the benefits of that come with it. So it's a really fascinating conversation that I ended up taking a fair bit from myself. So yeah, I really encourage you all to listen to it if you're interested in any way in what the world of chiropractic is all about. So yeah, get yourself on this podcast. Hopefully you enjoy it. John, welcome to the podcast today. We're here for another episode, Better Never Ends. And we've known each other a long time. We've been colleagues, friends. Yep. We've now soon become sort of rivals. Is that fair to say in some ways? I'm not sure I really feel it's like that, but we now work in the same building but with different companies.
Yeah, I mean, we operate in different niches. I'm not sure. There's plenty of people out there that we're not quite rivals. We're there to try and help each other and assist each other. I don't think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're here, which shows an element of friendly rivalry at worst.
Absolutely.
Probably. Yeah. So John Cairns is a chiropractor, and we used to work together at Pure Sports Medicine, and we now work at Until, where we run our own businesses. So John, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey, your life, and what's led you to coming into Until and running your business here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a chiropractor originally trained, and then I went on to do my sports medicine masters, got involved in sport. I used to swim competitively as a kid, so had a little bit of an in into the swimming team, looked after some of the swimming guys for a while at national level, moved on to fencing, mainly a lot of areas that had shoulder problems, which has got nothing to do with chiropractic. Yeah. So heavily got involved in that. And then in the background, just lots of private practice, basically. Yeah, I mean, my journey so far has mainly been around sport, and now I'm kind of trying to move away from that and take the lessons that I have from sport to the general public.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to mine, actually. I think that having that balance certainly suited me very well, and lots of people go on their own journey, but I liked the fact that I was working in sport on the side, but also in private practice. It felt like both were contributing to each other in clinical terms, in knowledge terms, and also enjoyment terms. I actually quite enjoyed that mix in my life.
Yeah, I must say, look, it's great having faces that you see regularly over and over and over again, which is fine because you invest in their story. But just the same with a new patient, with a new problem, with a different approach, is great fun as well. It's kind of new detective work that you keep getting every time they come in the door. And I think you don't get that with sport. You almost know what you're going to get.
I agree. Totally agree. Yeah. I think I tried full-time sport and realised it didn't quite stimulate me enough. And that's where I was searching for a bit more knowledge, a bit more challenge in my life. And I still love the excitement of the big game day type of situation. But yeah, very happy now to do a bit of both and enjoy both sides. So John, tell me a bit about the history of chiropractic.
Yeah, I mean, we're an interesting bunch and how we ended up being how we are. Originally, chiropractic was originally taught by a guy called D.D. Palmer, who had very strong belief systems on what you could do to the nervous system through manipulation. And his original group of students, which there were 4 of him, studied under him from a year. And then they broke off and wrote a book called Modern Day Chiropractic.
When was this?
It was the 1890s or something like that. So it's a while ago.
Quite a long time ago.
Quite a while ago. Yeah, it's been a while, you know. And essentially, he had this strong belief system of what he was doing in terms of manipulation and what he was changing in the nervous system. However, at the time, if you were practicing treatment without a medical license, you were arrested.
Wow.
So essentially, anyone practicing chiropractic at the time was thrown in jail because the answer was, well, are you a doctor? You're not a doctor. Therefore, we're locking you up for quackery because you're pretending to be a doctor. The guys who'd split off for modern day chiropractic saw it not as treating the nervous system. They saw it as treating movement and function and getting the joint moving better. And this was what their book was about. And the way that chiropractors stopped being thrown in jail was to come up with something that the medical system wasn't doing, which was treating subluxations, which was a subluxation just means less than a dislocation. It's just Latin for sub, and luxation is dislocation. Yeah. So this was their defense in court, and anyone who used it as defense in court weren't thrown in jail. So it became the thing that we were treating. And then obviously you got these modern day guys that were saying, we don't think we're doing that, which was more in line with how a modern day chiropractor actually looks at things. It's very much in line with the medical profession. It's very much in terms of improving function, improving joint pain, all of those things. But they end up fading away because they didn't adopt this subluxation model because they were unable to practice. And if they did practice, jail time, right?
Wow.
And then obviously that split our profession from growing for a while. And I think, you know, the boys club of the time of you're either in to treat medicine or not, you know, kind of forced chiropractic to be how it is in terms of an outsider from the very beginning, but also forced it as an extreme outsider rather than being a bit aligned close to medicine. It's taken all these years, like maybe 90 years, for us to kind of get back inside alongside it.
And even now, people are still considered much more biomedical in their thought process, which sounds like it was essentially defined by this conflict, this situation. Yeah. So that starts to answer a lot of questions about why the chiropractic world, in many corners, is seen as against modern practice.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, it's this kind of, you know, descendants of descendants not accepting you and grudge carrying on for years and years. And yeah, exactly. They told us we couldn't be part of their group, so we're definitely not going to be friends with them, you know?
Yeah. Now it starts to make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, it's crazy, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, if something was slightly different and they were slightly more reasonable on either side, it could have been a completely different story. And it might not exist as a profession, actually.
Yeah, and yet way back when they were talking about its influence on the neurological system, which is very modern.
Yeah,
in some ways.
It is. Well, actually, it is very, very modern. But it was very much taught in the way that, you know, this nerve connects to your liver. Yeah, you know, we'll manipulate it, so therefore we're changing the function of your liver. Yeah, which obviously we know with the whole plastic change model in terms of neurology is not true. You know, we change something. Yes, something changes the stimulus in our brain. 30 seconds later, it changes back. You know, we're very adapted for homeostasis. Yeah.
But there it is. There's the history.
That's the history. Yeah, crazy.
Tell us then about how that sports environment then has molded you into a modern chiropractor. And I think that's what you are, right? I see you as a modern chiropractor.
Yeah, I mean, definitely what I would classify myself as a modern chiropractor, which hopefully we'll be able to define maybe today.
Yeah, go for it. Lead us there.
Which is, well, basically we look at function and movement, try and basically improve quality of movement and then add to it through your rehab. And our job, I mean, what we want to do with every patient is give them their diagnosis, tell them, like, what do you want to get to? Let's get you to your goal. And regardless of how we get there, whether it is manipulation or whether we need to get help of guys like yourself alongside it in the S&C, we make it happen for them. We make it all about our patients, basically.
Yeah, so this kind of patient-centered approach is certainly becoming a centre point of good healthcare and good clinical practice. And the profession is becoming a bit less relevant, isn't it? It's almost the way you train is defined by whether you're a chiro, physio, osteo, whatever that might be, massage. But the way you apply that is starting to become more varied and more grey, isn't it? And you choose your own path and you go your own way. But because everyone has access to the same information and the same knowledge, I'm sensing that the ones who really think about what they do, challenge themselves, are gravitating towards similar concepts now, similar ideas, regardless of profession.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think ultimately, so in also backstory to this, I was part of the education board, and one of the things we tried to do in chiropractic was amalgamate physios and chiropractors.
Okay.
And I think it would have worked really, really well, because not so much other types, but musculoskeletal physios, there's a lot of crossover, and we've got bits we can teach each other. But you're right, because we have access to all that knowledge now, you're kind of getting like almost a clinician. People are coming to see John, not the chiropractor,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
probably like they come to see Charlie, not the physio Charlie, you know. So it becomes about you having a blend and style that is you gathering as much knowledge as you can to give your patient the best outcome.
Yeah, well, I've had my own battles with my professional title of physiotherapist, and have sort of jokingly, but not jokingly, rephrased it and retermed it to being a physio coach. You know, having that coach mentality, not so much the therapist. And although there's bits of therapy that drift into some of our practice, I tend to lean on being a coach and enabling and facilitating and encouraging and empowering, rather than that sort of fixed mindset that sometimes a therapist can be.
Yeah, I think we share that message basically. We were just talking before this about how our main goals, or at least my main goal is, and I presume it's yours as well, is to basically give the power to the patient. You know, here's the tools and here's what you can do. I'm here to teach you how to do it. I'll help you along the way with some other stuff, but let's ultimately see whether we can give it to you so you can look after yourself from this point onwards.
Yeah, which I think is the empowering mindset that in the end, the long-term gains are much more likely to come through that, by empowering people and giving them the tools. You know, you've got to teach them to fish. You know, you don't want to just give them the fish. You know, you've got to try and give them what they need. The tools.
It's basically creating independence, really. You know, I would view seeing a good job as people saying, thanks, John, I don't need you anymore, you know, or I've broken this and I know last time you helped something, so I'm definitely going to come back to you because I know your goal is to sort that out. For sure.
Yeah, I had someone actually cancel on me the other day. We had a free video call, and I'd given him some ideas about how I might be able to help, and he said, yep, sure, you're not covered on my insurance, but I'll come in. I was like, okay, great, let's book something in. 2 weeks later, he said, I'm really, really sorry, I'm gonna have to cancel my shoulders bed. I was like, don't worry, that's amazing, that's great. He was like, you don't need me, that's awesome. I mean, I didn't really even help him in that situation, but people almost feel guilty about cancelling. But I mean, for me, the absolute priority is people to be able to live their lives and live their lives well. So
yeah, exactly. Get them back to, I think the goal of the whole practice that we're doing is get you back to doing what you love. You know, our philosophy when we put together our clinic was, well, let's get on the journey with you. What do you want to do? If you can't do it, how can we make it possible that you can do it? You know? Yeah,
we're on similar journeys, you know, running out, and rivalry is kicking in here again. But I think that's why we get on, and we have similar ethoses. We have these same values and same ways of supporting people to do what they want to do. So let's talk a little bit maybe more about the old style chiropractor. I don't even know old is the right way of saying it, but the more traditional chiropractic treatments. So you obviously still do some of that. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the hands-on treatment and the manipulation, the cracking stuff, the honest answer is it's great for some patients. There's definitely a demographic that it works really, really well with, that are not getting good movement, that they are in some pain, and you can provide instant pain relief as a gateway to get them somewhere else. That I wouldn't call that traditional chiropractic in a lot of ways. That is sort of modern chiropractic, like let's get you hands-on and treated, and let's get you doing the thing you need to do from there so that the pain's calm enough. And I mean, look, the other thing around it is there's definitely body types that suit you really, really well. There are some people that love it when there is some popping sounds in their joints, and they instantly are like, yes, thank you so much. My back feels tons better. And then I'm like, all right, great, let's do this. And they're like, yeah, I can do that now because you've almost allowed me to do it. And there are some people who, on the other end of it, chiropractic is not for everyone, who are absolutely terrified of it. And I always say to my patients, let's figure out what works for you. And if you don't like this manipulation bit, we won't do it. You know, there's other ways to treat you. But yeah, there's a lot of people that it's a big gateway for them to start calming down, reducing pain, and feeling like a normal person again.
Why does it do that then? Why does it make you feel better?
Yeah, good question. Probably a number of things. You know, definitely you can get increase in range straight away. You get some reduction in tension from manipulation. And also I think there's a mindset around it. There's almost like, okay, I've been manipulated, now I can move better. You almost allow someone to move better. So I'm sure there'll be some chiropractors who jump on me for it, but yeah, there's definitely an element of a mental and placebo effect there where people are saying, you know what, that was it, that's what I needed, and then they start doing stuff. And I think that's part of treatment. I don't want to take away from that.
I agree.
People see it as a dirty thing, and I say, no, we've got to use what's in people's minds to get them engaged.
Why do we spend time on reviews? Why do we spend time making our clinic look fancy? Why do we make sure that we dress well? Why do we do these things? It's because there we are enhancing the expectation of effect. So why would that be a problematic within our treatment modality itself if it is for a good reason?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part of treatment, and it's all part of, you know, I think the reason why people struggle with it is because in the past, it was their superpower. You know, it was all about them. You know, what I do with the power of my hands, I changed you, it was me, you know. Now we're having to remove ourselves and say, yeah, I facilitated you, and it was you, you know. And that doesn't always sit well with some clinicians, especially guys who are very self-congratulatory. I mean, I almost feel like, you know, you try and heap some praise on me sometimes with some patients, and the first thing I do is I kind of shrink somewhere into a corner and I'm like, no, it's fine. It wasn't anything to do with me. It was all you. You know? So, I think that's why people struggle with it inside the clinical world. And then on the other side of things, talking to it for patients, some of them struggle with it because then they think they're being tricked. And they say, oh, is it just a trick then? Well, not really. It's quite complicated, you know. There's a whole build-up of whole mental mindscape behind there that is the right treatment for you because of how you've arrived to where you are in your life, what feels good for you. You know, that is all part of treatment. And yes, there's an element of your brain saying calming down, but that's everything, you know. So that is treatment. Yeah,
because physiologically, am I right in saying that for a very short period, and sometimes a really, really short period, like a matter of minutes, there is a physiological relaxation of surrounding musculature?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that is, and the issue with the studies that surround this is none of them have really followed up for any period of time. So we don't know whether that is minutes, hours, days, and it's probably not either way. You know, when we start using our body in a different way, you know, I'm sure that for some patients it is minutes. They just feel like it's okay for just a while. And for some other patients, there's almost permission to be, all right, now we can move. And that tumbles the journey along. Yeah.
So you've probably got some people where it's not giving them any meaningful benefit at all. And you get some others that actually it gives a huge benefit, and lots of people somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
And is it fair to say then that it offers a window of opportunity to allow them to do more, right? And that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, exactly. We're creating a window for them to do something with. And so, I mean, the ones that are the hardest then to get on board for doing anything else are the ones that have those miracle moments. You're like a Jesus to them, and you just do one thing, and then they're like, right, that's it, my life's fine, and I've been great for months and months. And then they'll have the same problem reoccur, and I'll say, now, maybe do you want to do something different? You know, maybe what? And they're like, no, just do that thing that you did last time. That's fine by me. You know, and then they'll tell all their friends, and then their friends will come, and I'll say, well, it doesn't quite work like that. It worked for him like that, but you know, we use it as a gateway to get you doing those things. Yeah.
And what do you tend to find? Because there'll be some people, like you say, who really rely on it. How do you communicate with those where they're like, oh, I don't want to do that other stuff. I just want that. Just keep clicking me.
Yeah. I think I have an honest conversation about it with them. I'm not going to withdraw their care from them. I'm not just going to say, well, you don't get care because you're not doing it the way I want you to do it. I'm going to say, look, if this is of benefit from you, I'm happy to do it. But remember, I think this is a temporary thing, and there's so many other things that we can do about it. You know? And sometimes you have that conversation 5 or 6 times and it'll be no different. And then one time you try saying it a different way and they say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll try this. Or sometimes they're just like, I want you to be my guy. You know, I'd rather you do it for me.
Yeah, my life's complicated enough. Just keep clicking me, please.
Yeah. Just keep me going. You know, I'm working a 70-hour week, John. I have barely time to socialize or see my kids.
Yeah.
Just make it stop hurting for a bit.
Look, and there's patients I see where they will understand, and they'll know that the thing that they need to do is more regular exercise, and they need to make these changes themselves. And they say, look, I'm probably not going to do it enough.
Yeah.
But I can come in once a week. Can you support me through that for the next however many months? I can think of a few, and to me that's fine. If I can help enable that positive habit, I know that in the end it's not good that I lead them through all of that, but if we can just keep having good conversations, build that habit, there's more chance that they're going to be able to come out the other side of that doing the right thing. Not always, it's not definitely going to happen, but that's the way I see it.
And it's far better than just abandoning them. You know, that's definitely not our role as a clinician, just to say, I'm sorry, if you don't want to do it my way, that's it. You know?
Sorry, I don't believe in that.
Yeah. Whoever's told you that is bad. So you don't listen to them. You only listen to me. I sort of say, you know, actually, if we can get you moving and it feels better, I'm happy to do with this, with the understanding that I would like to do something different long-term wise.
Yeah. And how far do you then take them, you know, as a modern chiropractor with experience in sports medicine, working in sport?
Yeah.
Where do you see your scope?
As in, how far do I take?
Yeah.
So I do get them in the gym. I do get some of them rehabbing and back to full gym programs. A lot of the time, especially with spinal stuff, I sort of become the PT, S&C coach, and that's pretty normal. And, you know, we have them on the plates, we measure strength-based stuff, and then we're saying, look, we think you're safe to go back to your sport. I mean, I see a lot of shoulders, and a lot of it's about reviewing how some of the force generates stuff to say, okay, go back and start playing, you know. And you're almost taking them all the way to play day and saying to the S&C coaches and their coach, here's what I want them to do as ongoing strength work. So I feel like I'm quite involved in the whole process. It seems to keep expanding, you know, especially as I'm learning a little bit more. Sometimes patients don't want you to be that involved, and it's understanding that. I actually quite like it when there are other people to get involved with it as well, because I think when you're the everything focus, sometimes when it isn't quite working and you want to say to them, I want to change direction, it's way easier if it comes from someone else, especially if what you've done has got them 70% of the distance, and they'll say, look, I'll just stick out with you. And I'll then say, well, actually, you know, we've been discussing you in the background. I think this is how we should progress you. Do you want to try this with a different person for a little bit?
Do you have any advice then for another modern day chiropractor who maybe hasn't got those skill sets? What would be the way where they might be able to expand that scope of practice and learn some different stuff?
Yeah, I think I've been really, really lucky in the sports industry, as you say, because, you know, everyone thinks you run off your feet in sport, and you're not really. You know, you are working in bursts.
Long days.
They're not,
but they're not busy days most of the time.
So you share a lot of conversation and topics with the other guys that you're hanging around with, and you get to learn off them.
You know? You stand on the sidelines a lot, you watch gym sessions a lot, you sit on coaches a lot, you have coffee a lot.
Yeah, you do have coffee a lot. So for those guys that don't have those skills, I think it's about probably making connections with other professionals, sitting in with them, you know, taking the time before, because there'll come a point in time where when you get good enough, you know, we've discussed how I work ridiculous hours. It just gets out of hand for you to sit down and understudy people. Do it while you're younger, like get in there. Also do it before you get the blinkers on and you get that prejudice in your mind, because, you know, the only time I'll see a patient normally from a mainstream physio will be when it hasn't worked. And then they'll come in and say, oh, it didn't work, but you guys are great. And I can see it's easy if you're a young, new age chiropractor to go, oh, they're just not doing a good job. The answer is they're doing an amazing job on 90% of people. You're just seeing that 10% fallout, and you're hearing the bad stuff, you know, probably the same way that happens chiropractically wise.
So then in your world, all the chiros are physio bashing, all the physios are chiro bashing, right? So how do we phrase that? Because I'm quite careful with it. People will say to me quite often, what do you make of chiropractors? And I'm like, well, I know some amazing chiropractors, and I know some average chiropractors, and I know some not so good ones, but I know the same in physio world. Some amazing physios, some average ones, and not so good ones. So what do you think? Does the profession matter in that instance?
I mean, for the perception of the patient, it does at the moment, and that's because of how we segregated things. I like what you're suggesting, that blurred lines future, where we're all a bit crossy over, and they'll say, you know, this kind of injury, you know, who's good at this? Charlie is. This kind of injury, you know, John's good at this, you know. And that's the way we should be pushing our patients, like towards the individual strength rather than the label of the, you know, who they've come out as. And, you know, to come to your point there about the bashing of professions, it's hard because we get fresh faces come out, and they'll be saying to me, who've qualified a few years, and I lecture and I teach, and I'll be like, I don't understand why the professions hate us, you know. And I'm like, you're just hearing the worst of it. Actually, a lot of people are very cool about it, you know. I think it's all right. That bashing of each other comes from minorities who've got a loud voice. It's like social media, basically.
There's a tribalism, isn't there?
There is.
That goes on, and it's like they have their following because they bash and because they have this tribalism. There are still some negative stories about chiropractors, and no doubt there's physios that do this too, but probably the most common one for me is the way that chiropractors sometimes operate more like businessmen rather than clinicians, where they are signing people up for endless 3 times a week packages that are costing thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Where and for sure I hear the worst of it sometimes when people come in. I spent this amount of money in like 6 months and I was no better and I was never any better. And you think, okay, right, there's some alarm bells triggering there. That's not so good care.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
I mean, I feel terrible about it, to be honest with you. It's not that it happens through some professions. We seem to have a group of people that do it, and that's almost the model when they come out of certain parts of universities. And not to point fingers at any areas, especially places like the States seem to be quite common that way around, and they're not all like that in the States. I've met plenty of chiropractors in the States that are great. But yeah, you're right. There's almost a model, and it's a shame. Going back to adding to the list of jobs that I've done as an expert, there is some case law and some ruling about how frequent you can treat a patient, and there are some guys that are trying to sell packages based on that case law because it's within the law, not about the patient. That's really disappointing. That is really, really disappointing, and it stops. I also think it's very soul destroying. I would like those practices to operate less. I mean, I know I would like an eco space for everyone because they're probably providing some good treatment for some patients, but I would like them to operate less because we're getting young guys come out qualifying, going to work for one of these places, and then within a year hating the profession. I've never hated my job, because they're just churning. It's like a conveyor belt. They're just churning people over. So they do exist out there. I don't want them to exist, but then also I understand that it is the
reality of our world is that there's always going to be people out there doing things they shouldn't be doing, and unfortunately that does exist in healthcare as much as it does in other areas and other professions. So how would the patient know? How does a person who's seeking care, they want to find out about chiropractors, they've got back pain, they've got shoulder pain, whatever, how would they know who's good and who's not so good?
Who to pick? Really, really good questioning, because nowadays marketing is exceptionally slick, isn't it? And these guys are good businessmen, some of these guys there. I would say from all of your clinicians, you should demand a few things. One is, what is wrong with me? Everyone should be able to explain that. If it's this, how long is it going to take to get better? And how do we measure that? So objectively, how can I say I'm getting better and tell me how I'm getting? What are you going to do to get me better? And what can I do to get me better? And they should be able to answer all of those things for their patients to say, all right, we've got a time frame, we've got it set, we've got some ways of measuring it. We know whether we're doing the right thing or not. What it shouldn't feel like is infinite care. It shouldn't feel,
I completely agree. And I guess patients sometimes don't put that pressure on, and they just expect that everyone is doing the right thing. And unfortunately, I guess that's what this conversation is about to some extent. They're not. And it's just as much your responsibility as a patient to suss out that side of things. And I'd really encourage anyone to do that with any clinician across the board. I mean, there'll be different styles of questioning for different professions, different problems, but something where you're trying to gauge their morality, perhaps, whether they're in it for the right reasons, they're in it for improving your health or not. And I love that concept about, can they measure it? I picked up this saying from, I can't even remember where I've taken it from because I wasn't the origin of it, but if you're not testing, you're guessing. And I think it's such a lovely thing to put that pressure on. Well, I put it on myself as a clinician, but also for a patient to be able to put that pressure on another clinician too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and coming back to what you're saying about patients not really talking to people about it, one of the other things is, if you feel you can't have a conversation with your clinician and those sort of something is already wrong. Some of it's your but they should instill that level of confidence in you that you could say, I'm just going to ask about this.
Don't settle, I think is really important. And there's plenty of people out there that I know that have come in to see me and they've gone, nah, that's not the right person for whatever reason. Maybe I didn't get their diagnosis right, or they didn't connect with me, they didn't like my shoes, whatever. I don't care. That's normal. That's the way things go. But perhaps too many people are just expecting that everyone is the same, and therefore, this must just be how chiropractors are.
Yeah, but how do you expect them to know anything different? Taking any walk of life that we do, we're building businesses. there's loads of people coming at me every single day saying, I can help you in marketing. I can do this. I can do this.
I don't know who's good.
By the way, I saw you have a few things where you're doing videos. Great. I can make millions for you. And I'm like, all right, mate, I've never heard of you before. Stop messaging me out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But also, how do I know people are going to get what I want to do with my clinic and who's going to do that kind of job? You know, I don't. I know nothing about it. It's like trial and error. And it's the same thing for patients, which is really frustrating because private healthcare is expensive, right?
Yeah.
It seems a bit unfair that you have to go through that trial and error. You know,
A big thing that I believe will become more of the future and more of a norm within our industry is reviews. And look, there's also ways of manipulating reviews and fake reviews, or harassing people, whatever. There are ways of cheating that system too. But I think on the whole, you can tell a really, really positive review versus an okay positive, like very good, enjoyed, better now, thanks, versus paragraph after paragraph of this is what happened, this is how it changed. And I've always felt that, certainly the physio profession, I don't know how it would be in yours, but people have been almost reluctant to get themselves reviewed, almost through this slight insecurity perhaps. But if we truly believe that we can help people and that we are good at what we do, how else do we get that message out there unless people come in? So sometimes you need to put those reviews there, or at least encourage those reviews so that people can get a feel for your style, a feel for your personality, what kind of injuries do you tend to treat. So that's their way of, I mean, how do we pick our takeaways? How do we pick our films? How do we pick our holidays? We often use review sites. It just seems to be that in our profession we're a bit behind the times on that. We're a bit reluctant to do it. So it is something I've been very, very much engaged in the last year or so, just because I think it's a really helpful thing on both ends. Yeah,
I agree with you. I mean, I'm going to agree with you because I have tons of fantastic reviews, which is really, really kind to my patient. Sometimes when I read them, I think, oh man, I didn't know I did this much for you. That's really, really kind of you.
They're lovely to read sometimes.
And you're absolutely right. I think there is that element of pressurizing. Here's your tenner off if you give me a review, and someone's like 5 stars, good. Just give me my tenner. And then there's those that you can see that they write these big paragraphs about what they did with their life, and there's lots of words like, he's very, very kind as well, which is obviously a lovely compliment, but gives you a feel of your approach, that you're going to be listening to patients and stuff like that. But you are right. I mean, it's a minefield for patients anyway, because there's lots of things that can be faked. This is the digital world, and also how they're going to find you from that, because if the reviews don't say the right words in them, they might have this cracking review about, how well you've looked after them. But if they don't mention your profession in it, it will never get flagged. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that is a world I don't understand. That'll be where I'd be, fishing around in the dark, trying to figure out how do I make sure all that stuff works out online. Because in fact, I think we've had a conversation with this recently. You seem to know a bit more about it than me. But I mean, there's a good example actually. I hadn't really connected it that much. I mean, of course, people wouldn't necessarily know what good physio and osteo and chiro is, because they're not in the world. They don't understand that in the same way. But it's a nice point to make, that if you don't feel that connection early on, it's probably something, even if it's just personality, it's not quite right. Because we do know that connection is such a valuable part of recovery. If you don't connect with that person, you're less likely to get better, which is mad, but it is the truth.
No, it is. It's the therapeutic alliance thing. It when I was qualifying, it was getting really popular, and then it kind of faded away, and now it's getting popular again. It seems to be coming back in and out with waves, But you're absolutely right. It is about that, finding that person that's like, they get me. That this is that they're gonna actually be on board with me, or I just trust them. And you're right. I've had recently a conversation with a patient where they saw me once and they were very anxious, really nervous, had a long-term chiropractor that's looked after them, and there was tons of questions, which is fine, but a lot of them were, can you get me better? Over and over again, are you going to get me better? Are you sure this will work? And I just said, look. Then they followed up with an email, and I talked to them over email, and I said, look, if you feel like the trust isn't there for me, this is the time to say, and I'm okay with that, because I will find you another clinician that will suit your needs. It is a big thing though. It's a big thing to put that faith in someone and say, I'm going to take that step and trust you. So if you're not feeling it, it is the time to walk away.
What do you think the most common question you get from patients around being a chiropractor? What's the kind of thing that you often get asked?
Probably, I mean, in reality, probably what the click is, and that I tend to come up with a very complicated answer about, it could be a plica in the capsule where there's a bit of folding and we're pulling it apart and that's why it's making that noise. But we're definitely not moving your bones around. We're just getting the joint to function better. And sometimes that's a bit of a disappointment to some people. I think they want me to be like, ancient China bone setter, your hips popped out to the shops and I'm popping it back in sort of stuff. So, I think, that's probably the most common thing. And then, why does it make me feel better? That's mainly because we're known for manipulation. And there are some guys that I don't manipulate at all. And I think there'll be, the expectation is come in and crack me,
Yeah. So I remember the version that I probably use around manipulations when people ask about that, because they ask me to, is that there's perhaps a vacuum that's inside the joint and it's snapping shut. It's like this kind of snap net noise when the vacuum shuts, or an air bubble that's shutting. It's like it's innocuous, it's benign, but it often makes you feel better, and that's why it's a really useful adjunct to helping getting you moving. So it's interesting that I've got my story, you've got yours, and they're different.
Yeah, absolutely.
and neither of us know whether they're right or not. And
there'll be another person who has a different story, and then we'll get better functional imaging one day, and then we'll be like, oh, no, neither of that happened. Well, what's going on here?
Do you ever tell the story about the orthopedic consultant who clicked the fingers on one hand for his entire life, x-rayed them at the start of his life, and then x-rayed them at the end?
No, I don't even know this story.
Okay, so it might even be a complete myth and it's not a real story, but I tell it all the time anyway. So there's an orthopedic consultant who was convinced, or I don't even know which end of the theory he was trying to prove or disprove, but he wanted to see, did an experiment on himself for his entire life.
Yeah.
So he x-rayed his hands at the start and at the end of this intervention, and he was clicking the fingers but only on one hand. Yeah. And the x-ray showed that there was absolutely no difference between his left and his right hand. So when people say, is that doing any damage, I always use that story and say, as far as I'm aware, it causes no damage to your structures.
Yeah. And as far as I'm aware, that's true as well. And oddly enough, there are patients who ask me about that. They'll say, oh, I've been to see another guy before and I think he's actually damaged because he's clicked me too much. Right? Yeah. That's probably not true, but let's see what's going on with you. Let's have a feel of it around instead and see whether there's something that can make you feel better.
However, we do also know that there are some situations where we have to be very cautious around manipulation. So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, so, and it's no secret because it's in the papers. So there are some cases of things like VBIA, vascular events. There was also a guy who had DISH, which is a very rare disorder where you get some calcification inside the spine, and he was in the middle. I was actually one of the experts on that case. He sadly had a manipulation, and because the inside of his spine was calcified, it fractured and then caused some compression on his spinal cord, which is very, very serious. All of those cases, this is one thing that the GCC is changing a little bit, and I actually agree with them on this, and it's easy for me to agree from it, which I'll explain in a minute. Is all of those cases seem to happen in the over 65s. There seems to be a question is, should we be manipulating those over the age of 65? For me, it's an easy to say, yeah, let's not do it, because I live in the middle of London. Yeah. My demographic's a sporting group, I'm not doing it on 65-year-olds anyway, so it's easy for me to throw aside, I've heard other chiropractors say, well, where's the line? I'm treating this guy till he's 64. He gets some benefit from this manipulation. He's 65. Do I say, oh, I'm sorry, mate?
It's this arbitrary number again, isn't it? But there is something in it as well. So what is it then about that older age group then that makes them more susceptible to have a serious incident?
Yeah, I think it's about the elasticity in the arteries that's changing as they get older. So they're more likely to have a vascular event, so you don't want to put a lot of force through their neck. Oddly enough, most of those kind of VBIA events are never VBIA. They're more sort of where you're getting the structures run through the front of the neck, where they're being compressed rather than inside the neck. It's actually quite hard to do some damage to those structures. So we've hardly had any cases of these structures at the back of the neck, and the US as well, and there's millions of instances of manipulation. It's more a case that when someone's compressing on their thumb on the front of your neck, they're more likely to cause this event. So, does there need to be some education on the way in which we do these things? Probably you've seen the American video of the Y strap, Basically they're putting a massive strap around the front of your neck. Should that be happening? Yeah. I mean, I think not, but we're in this weird zone where some of the treatment over there has breached into the entertainment world, and it is, massively entertainment.
I mean, there's some real crazy videos on Instagram as well, hammer and chisel stuff, there's all sorts of things
sometimes
going on.
Absolutely nowhere near the patient's problem.
Yes.
It's just very infuriating to me as a chiropractor, because then someone will be saying, I need you to do this on me. And I'll be saying, I mean, this guy came in with this problem as the video is showing, but he's nowhere near this problem. So, with a bit of logic, he's obviously not treating that area. Why would you want this done? But it's very there was a paper a long time ago where it was just a discussion piece that was published called the Chiropractic Dicot, which talks about the split between those that are trying to become more aligned with the medical profession and modern day health, and then more those that are going down this kind of etheric and entertainment route. And they said, look, the profession's dividing, but we're such a small profession to pay for regulation, to have our medical license, we need to be together. So we can't tell one group, no, we're not interested in you. They can't tell us, no, we're not interested in you. So we're all under one banner, basically. It's tough, because obviously I'm constantly then saying to patients, some of this is for the likes. Some of it, they'll have a media manager that will be saying, do something more extreme, because then we're going to get 30, 40 grand's worth of ads off the back of this, That's very difficult. It's strangely, in my profession, a lot more than other professions,
And I think this is where sometimes that bad rap comes from, that bad reputation comes from, is that and I think you've landed on that point now, is that there is just a group within your profession that are doing that quite deliberately, and they are trying to seek out their marketing through those means.
Yeah.
What do you do? I don't know. That seems a tricky one.
It is a tricky one, to be honest with you. I think it's then about, this is what I've struggled like yourself with the name of chiropractic. As I'm often saying to my patient, I'm just John, let's just do what we can for you, I think you then it's about picking what you do in the way that you present yourself to get the patients that are going to buy into the way that you want to treat, so they're right for you. And you've just got to ignore the other noise. The weird thing is, some of those very etheric and out there treatments, there'll be some great benefit in them. And I think because they're under the guise of these big flashy moments, us further investigating their benefits are actually being lost. So I say there's probably good stuff in them, but because it's become about this big show, a lot of us are already saying, we just disregard this, because obviously these guys are just doing this for the likes,
Yeah, well, I think this is where experience comes in with that, is that the more experienced you are and the more you think broadly and you challenge your own thoughts, reflect, is that you will start to identify that for a small minority of your patients, you need to treat this way, but you understand the patterns. There isn't an evidence base out there that says this is the way you treat, because there's not enough people that actually benefit that way. And it's too complicated to design a study that says that we identify this person this way, this way, this way.
Yep.
And in the end, we've got enough people to prove it. But as an experienced clinician, part of that evidence-based model is that you learn through experience. And that to me is okay. And you just choose that item of your toolbox to say, I think that your pattern suggests this way of treatment.
Yeah.
But actually the problem is that if you use that treatment for everyone, you're going to miss a lot of people as well.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely agree with you. I think it's about picking the right situation for the person. You think, I think this is going to work well for you. I've seen your body type, I've seen what you do, and I think this style is the right thing for you, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and you use the word think, because I use it as well. I sit on the fence with confidence.
Yeah.
I say. There is no way I can guarantee this is going to work, but I think this has the best chance of success. If it doesn't, here's the plan. Here's the backup plan.
Absolutely.
So you sit on the fence with confidence until you know which side to jump down on.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of walking a tiptoe line, and that's a good question actually. Confidence is definitely a part of treatment.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder, as a bit of an overthinker, if I come in and plow in and say, this is going to work for you, I'm sure for some patients it will work better. For me, I feel like I'm doing a bit of an injustice to myself to say that.
Yes. Well, the problem could come when you confidently say, this is going to work, and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
We've all been there for that as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I tread carefully initially and use that style of wording to say there are some options, this is likely going to work. But let's see how it goes. We're going to trial and error, but there is some logic behind this. There is some rationale behind the reason why we're trialing and erroring.
Yeah, and I have a story where I work with different groups of people, and because shoulder's an area that I work with, I discussed with a French surgeon about how we should manage a shoulder, and I gave him like 6 or 7 different options, And in France, it was a bicep tendinopathy, and there's normally one route of treatment for that, and it's like, this is the answer, done, Because I said, let's do this, and if this doesn't work, we can try this. If this doesn't work, we can try this. And, I fed back to the patient and fed back to the surgeon. And then I said to the patient, what did the surgeon think of my plan? And he said, he thought you were a bit unconfident, Says you don't seem very sure of yourself. And I was like, oh, I thought I was being really reasonable.
Yeah. I'm certain that this is uncertain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And therefore I'm going to use uncertainty until I'm certain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the case, is that we do live in a world sometimes where people want definites. And, I was talking earlier about the people who don't stick around with me. I bet some of those are people who were thinking that I didn't know what I was talking about because I wasn't certain enough.
Yeah. There wasn't a punchy enough one answer,
Yeah. Well, is there anything we're missing? Anything that you think we should talk about that's relevant to the world of chiropractic?
Yeah, I mean, probably we covered a lot of stuff, which was great. I think probably where our profession goes in the future. We talked about that die-cutting and that splitting. I think there's plenty of room. And what I'd like to see, and I think why we're not so well accepted in the mainstream and why younger modern-day chiropractors are not being so accepted, is because they're not in front of docs as frequently. They're not in front of physios as frequently. I've worked with a few of the universities, and what I've said on their programs is, why don't we start joining with other universities and doing our research models and anatomy models together? Because I find collaboration works better with a friend than it does with another person from the profession. So if we change those grassroots those guys are coming through university, you have your lesson together, you have a beer together, when someone says, oh, I heard this terrible case about a chiropractor or a physio, they just pick up their phone to their mate and say, is this true? And that just starts dispelling that background wedge that's being driven between the two of us. Because I think basically now where I've got to, there's probably very similar things in practice that are more close to what I do, that you do in practice. And it's just that if we didn't know each other through work, we probably have no idea what we do.
So I think there's essentially, like, conversations create empathy.
Yeah.
And be deliberate about broadening your horizons. Hopefully in the future, I think what you're getting at is that structurally we build that into the way it's taught. But actually going forwards, if you're not taught that way and you've missed that boat already, broaden your horizons with deliberance. Go out and find people who think differently to you. Yeah. And go out and find people who had a different practice to you. And you might find that those people are doing similar things, but also very different things, and ask questions. If you ask good questions, you tend to get more answers.
Yeah, and go with your eyes open. It's difficult because there will always be a degree of ego and you thinking you're doing the best thing if you're insulated inside a small practice. It's kind of the beauty of the sort of space we work in. Yeah. We're getting to see other people's ideas. Yeah. And rather than going there and saying, that's probably not going to work, just go there and say, all right, let's see what you're doing, and then let's see what happens to the patients.
Yeah. And had I not have met you and experienced the way you practice, I think my opinion of chiropractic would have been very different too. So there is that example right there staring me in the face that gave me a different viewpoint of what chiropractic's all about, or could be about. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, just out of curiosity, before you did meet me, what was your experience of chiropractors?
I've always tried to be careful about bashing a clinician and a profession, but I would have definitely swayed more onto the fact that people in the chiropractic world are more likely to have been taught about business and therefore might practice more to maximize their business rather than to help you. And I've always been careful because I don't like just tarnishing everyone with the same brush.
Overgeneralizing.
Yeah, but it was certainly that mindset that they're more likely to click you and use their manual handling techniques to do various techniques to you.
Yep.
And they're less likely to do rehab. And then you came along and I saw you in the gym alone doing rehab, and I thought, hang on a minute, what's going on here then? And so I asked some questions and got to know you and figured out that you had just broadened your horizons ultimately.
Yeah. And I think it's just having that ability to offer patients a wider base. Yeah.
Well, just to finish off here, so this podcast is Better Never Ends. What do you what is your Better Never Ends? How do you broaden your own knowledge, and how do you strive for something that's going to help you with learning or whatever it might be in life?
I think I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by some decent clinicians on a regular basis, and it is I mean, the thing that's probably taught me the most is through different clinics that I've worked in, I've always encouraged joint sessions. And sometimes just sitting in and seeing what someone else is doing, giving a bit of my time for free, and then saying, here's my thoughts on this when I'm in with a session, and then another clinician saying, well, what would you think about this? I think that has been a lot more special for patients and better for my learning. That's helped me move on massively, and also keep challenging me, because I think it's very easy just to come in and do the day in and day out and do the stuff that you're good at, and then you just get stuck in that bubble while other things are growing. If you're seeing other people experience other things, you want to bring something to the party, so you come in and bring more stuff, and there's more discussion, and you learn more that way around.
Yeah, collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for coming in, John. Really great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me in.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Better, provider of health, wellness and performance services based in central London. You can book in for face-to-face services at either of our 2 clinics, one in Soho and one in the city. You can also follow us on Instagram at Better Never Ends, or head over to our website for more information about the clinics or the podcast at www.betterneverends.com. And of course, if you want to send us an email with any feedback, questions or suggestions for future episodes, then email us on podcast@betterneverends.com. And finally, thanks to Brian Long for editing the show. Without him, it's absolutely no doubt in my mind that these would never have seen the light of day, and it will allow this podcast to continue on for as long as I'll keep recording them. So thanks very much, Brian.